You really can't start on this control unless you've actually done the first two here, where you have a full inventory of your software and your hardware. First control in the risk assessment family within Identify. All the asset vulnerabilities are identified and documented. You really can't start on this control unless you've actually done the first two here, where you have a full inventory of your software and your hardware. Because how are you going to be able to identify vulnerabilities on devices or software that you don't know exist within your environment? So the goal really here, after completing and understanding ID.RA-1 and 2, is having a documented procedure that's in place to ensure that asset vulnerabilities are tracked and remediated once identified, or remediated within your risk tolerance. So leveraging some type of automated tools or systems that are in place, having a formal risk registry for when you find vulnerabilities, and ensuring that they are managed appropriately within that risk register, again, within your risk tolerance. Making sure that the vulnerability identification techniques are adaptive in case that you have some type of change in your environment or a change inside of the threat landscape. That your people, which we saw underneath the governance, you have people or roles established now within security, that they regularly receive the training on these tools, technologies. They're getting information back to be able to then identify new vulnerabilities. So if you ideally have ID.RA-1 and 2 in place, you know what your software and systems are. Using some type of a platform, an automated scanner, there's multiple ones out there, or also just using the kind of the differential method where you are looking for or knowledgeable about, ideally, your full asset inventory, and then as new vulnerabilities are identified, you quickly can establish and know, oh, I see that my Apache server is running version 1.2, and now a release has come out saying that 1.2 is vulnerable, and version 1.3 is now available. Without even using a scanning tool, I have identified and are knowledgeable about the fact that this system running that software on an older version is vulnerable. I didn't even have to scan for it. This actually works very well within operational technology, or OT, or ICS, and SCADA environments, where the networks and the environment is a little bit more, susceptible to active scanning and such. But within IT environments, ideally, if you have a stable environment and you're not running too many legacy systems, you can use these legacy tools to be able to scan for these systems and identify where you have vulnerabilities, where they are, what they are, and then be able to then report that back into some type of documentation, and then using that to then run into a risk register. And if your risk tolerance is that you can say, this is not a publicly facing system, it's an internal system, and while the scanner has identified this within like maybe the CVSS scale or whatever as critical or high, maybe because of your risk tolerance and your system, you can then within your risk platform maybe even reduce it to a medium, possibly a low, whatever it is, that you've determined your risk tolerance is. Because again, you have figured out that you have compensating controls in place. But the core to all of this, again, beyond just having an identified asset inventory, software inventory, is being able to identify where these vulnerabilities are. So again, ID risk assessment number 1, asset vulnerabilities are identified and documented. And again, there's a follow-on from the initial identification controls of asset management.